have a responsibility, I think, to look forward, to see how we can manage our way through this, because let's be honest, it's going to be with us for quite some time. So how can this adversity be beaten? What options are there to put implementable measures in place? And that's our focus this morning, as we're going to hear from companies that have risen to the challenge. We're also going to hear from DTI, and I sincerely hope that the program that we have put together for you is valuable, that it is going to enable you to help your business. As I say, we have a representative from DTI, Annelies van der Merwe. I'm also going to introduce you a little later to Eddie Mokobodi, founder of Sakisa. It is a company in the energy space. He's also a proudly South African member, along with Mamiki Maklawa, who is Group Business Development Executive at another power and energy company, Actom. Once the guests have given a short presentation, it'll be my honor and my privilege to host a quick roundtable discussion. I will always keep an eye on questions that you might answer, because having done this on a number of occasions before for Proudly South African, the whole intention of this is for you to engage and to listen and to see what Proudly South African solutions we can find to the challenges and the problems that we are currently experiencing. So that sets the scene. As I say, my name's Jeremy Maggs. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you. I am proudly South African. There is absolutely no doubt about that. So let's start the process this morning. Let me just remind you of the mandate, the campaign, what Proudly South African is all about. And let me introduce you now to the Chief Executive Officer of the organization, Eustace Mashimbe. A very good morning to you. I will hand the virtual floor, as they say, over to you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate you handing over the virtual floor to me. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to go first this morning when we are having such an important conversation. So to all our panelists who have availed themselves for this morning session, thank you very much for availing yourselves. Friends of the campaign, as we know them, or as we refer to them. And to all our delegates who are joining us, including those who have opted to view this on the live streaming platform rather. So I'm going to share a few slides with you, in keeping with what Jeremy said, to introduce you to Proudly South African and the campaign thereof. We don't want to assume that all of you know what the campaign is about, and I'll also touch on some of the opportunities that we see within Proudly South African, that are linked to this energy crisis as we see it, which also presents some opportunities, lots of opportunities, in fact. So, as introduced, my name is Eustace. I'm the CEO of Proudly South African, and we're a buy local campaign. And the role of Proudly South African is to educate, South Africans, and to get those who make purchasing decisions to choose locally made products whenever they buy. But this mandate of Proudly South African stems from the fact that the country battles three main challenges, and the main one being unemployment. And when the campaign was formed back in 1998, it was as a result of a presidential job summit hosted to try and come up with ways to create much needed new job opportunities and to retain existing jobs. And so, being a country that battles high levels of unemployment to date, we have seen that it breeds poverty and leads to inequality. And so, we have a role to play in ensuring that we can help contribute to the turning of the tide. These are just some numbers. At the end of quarter 2 of 2022, the unemployment rate in South Africa stood at 33.9%, with 8 million of our people actively looking for jobs, and they can't secure any. We know that there's an additional 3.6 million people who are still unemployed, but they are discouraged. They've decided to stop looking. So if you look at the expanded definition of unemployment, which includes those who are actively looking as well as those who are discouraged and have stopped looking, you're looking at about 11.6 million people. In the main, it's the young people and women who are affected. And we commissioned research as Policy South African a few months ago. And when the study came out, when the results of the study rather came out, a study commissioned by Policy South African but undertaken by Pan-African Investment and Research Services. These are just some of the findings which I think are useful for sharing in the context of the opportunities that we think exist in an industry like this. Manufacturing contributes significantly, towards GDP, but if you look at what it used to contribute previously, it dropped a lot. An industry that used to contribute close to 20% about 20 or so years ago, now contributing 13% to the GDP. In terms of employment, there was only an average of 1.8 million people employed in manufacturing in 2019. But because of COVID and a lot of this economic challenges that we have faced as an economy and as a country, that was declined to 1.4 million direct jobs in 2021. So in being broadly an industry that has subsectors that are labor intensive, manufacturing is quite important in the context of not just creating jobs, but contributing to some of the key economic indicators. These are just some of the findings of that study. And basically the study sought to identify what the benefits would be if as an economy we decided to increase our investment in manufacturing through buying that which is locally made, and then as a need for that which is locally made improves, especially within manufacturing, then if we were to invest in manufacturing. These are just some of the medium-term results. We would see an increase to 13% contribution to the GDP. You would see that there would be an increase in real wages. There would be an increase in to contribute to household consumption, then, because you have more people who are in jobs. In fact, the real wages one, I think, is important that I touch on it. Entry-level jobs right now, because of the fourth industrial revolution and the use of technology, even in manufacturing, has meant that entry-level jobs are now, higher skilled. It's not as a lower skilled job as it was previously. And so the entry-level wages are much higher. So as you buy that which is locally made, as we contribute to the growth of manufacturing, and there are new jobs created in manufacturing, what you then find is that you have people coming into employment, but the wages and the earnings that they derive, or the remuneration that they derive from those jobs, it's quite high. So in the medium term and even in the short term, there are benefits to increasing investment, and that study shows us. There's a 9% increase in fiscal revenue if we increase investment in manufacturing, and that helps the state to have more resources to deploy into areas such as safety and security and health and education and some of those other imperatives. So broadly speaking, manufacturing as a labor-intensive industry with subsectors that are equally labor-intensive is very important in the context of growing the economy. If you invest in manufacturing, you can create about 75,300 jobs directly, instantly, and there are some indirect jobs that are then created. But in order for this to work, in order for manufacturing to grow, there are transversal issues that needs to be taken care of, and energy is number one. So I thought in the context of a discussion we're having today, I should indicate that energy remains critical. So if you think back to the numbers that Jeremy touched on when he started, it is important that we get the energy sector right, the water, skilled human resources, etc. Those are also important. But the context of today, the focus is on energy, and so, being an economy that, it's clear that our economy needs to be boosted somehow, and energy is one of those transversal issues or transversal items that needs to be taken care of in order for the economy to operate at the level that is required. You need to have alternative sources. So some of the major types of renewable energy sources that are out there includes biomass, wood and wood waste, municipal solid waste, landfill gas and biogas, biofuels, hydropower, geothermal, and the most popular ones right now is wind, as well as solar energy. So those are all industries where there's an opportunity, and there are speakers and panelists who will talk to you today about what they've done to contribute to that. But these are just industries that you can potentially go into in trying to solve a solution, the solution that we're sitting with as an economy. Because remember, that the biggest opportunity for any entrepreneur is to identify where the gaps are and come up with a solution. And here's a gap, and the solutions are, as you see them on the screen. So these are just some of the industries that can potentially come up, and each of these, before I move on to the next slide, each of these come with them other opportunities, including storage. I mean, in the study, there is one of the outcomes of the study is that there are opportunities within manufacturing for new industries to emerge, and the storage industry, I mean, the batteries that are required, as example, when you utilize solar, you need batteries, as you store that capacity that is generated through the sun, that energy needs to be stored in batteries. And so that's another industry that you can potentially look at. So the opportunities are endless. Let's talk quickly about why PaliSouth can exist. Now that I've touched on why the event and why we chose to delve into this conversation. Is imports have continuously impacted negatively on the economy of South Africa. If you look at the numbers that I showed earlier on, where the contribution from biomanufacturing into the GDP or into the economy of the country dropped from about 20% to 13%, it's because we have an industry like this where imports have resulted in capacity loss. 3,500 factories we had in the past, reduced to 1,100 factories within a 20-year period between 1999 and 2020. In terms of direct jobs, we lost about 25,000 of the 50,000 jobs that we had in 1999. And those are just direct jobs in that industry because of imports coming into the country. If you look at the value chain itself, outside of the direct jobs, the 25,000 direct jobs that I've showed you, the multiply effect extends to other industries. So every time you import a furniture item into the country, it effectively takes away market share, and not just from furniture manufacturers, but also from all of these manufacturers or all of these industries who contribute raw materials and components into furniture manufacturing. So the plastics industry, as an example, contributes synthetic fibers. The agricultural industry contributes natural fibers and hides and skins that are in turn utilized by the textiles and leather industry, because they then produce that which is utilized by furniture manufacturers. We get metal parts from the metal industry. We get paints and adhesives from the chemical sector. So there are, the value chain is extensive. It's not just the 25,000 direct jobs that I showed you that were lost. Jobs were lost in other industries as a result of purchasing decisions made by all sectors of society. And so this phenomenon of getting those who reside within the borders of a certain country to buy products that are made in that country is a global phenomenon. It's not unique to South Africa. It happens globally. There are buy local campaigns for towns, for regions, for countries. And the United States, which is a case study for today, is that they even have legislation dating as far back as 1933. This has always been part of their macroeconomic policy framework. And, as recent as in 2017, they issued the Buy America Improvement Act. And even the current president, when he came into office, he prioritized the buying of locally made products. As I alluded to earlier on, if you buy products that are made in South Africa, those manufacturers, those who render services, not just about products only, but it's products and services. I just focused a lot on manufacturing and on products, because the conversation today touches a lot on products, but it's products and services. But as you buy that which is locally made, you are allowing those companies that have created those jobs to retain the jobs that they have. And as demand for that which they supply increases, they're able to create much new job opportunities, much needed new job opportunities. And those that they employ can then acquire skills. The standard of living will improve. It helps contribute to the development of the economy. So our mandate is quite simple. Everyone who makes a purchasing decision should be encouraged to buy local. The public sector, being all spheres of government, at national level, at provincial level, at a local level, including all SOEs across all of those levels of government, have to be encouraged to buy local. There's even legislation to that effect in government, and I'll touch on it shortly. We have to encourage the private sector to buy local, and I'll show you how we do that through our access to market programs. And we have to educate the general public on the importance and the economic impact of their purchasing decisions. Consumers need to understand that if they buy, energy equipment that is made in China, if they buy any product that is made elsewhere, they're creating jobs in that economy. Lastly, the role of PaliSouth is to make sure that each of these sectors of the economy can easily access, locally made products, each of the sectors of society, rather, when they choose to buy local, when they choose to heed our call to support the economy, that they can easily access locally made products and services. You have seen the Proudly South African logo before. It embodies 4 key qualities. The logo itself is made up of the colors of the flag of the Republic of South Africa, telling you that the actual product itself is made in South Africa. So every time members utilize the logo, you know that even the raw materials and components that they're utilizing to produce those products are sourced locally. If they're rendering services, the equipment and machinery and consumables that they utilize to render the services are sourced in South Africa. And in instances where they are not available in South Africa, those raw materials or components that they require, they can bring them in from outside, but they have to be transformed into the final product within the borders of South Africa. The value addition must happen within the borders of South Africa. The next thing that is important is that the product must be of a high quality nature. The tick in the logo tells you that you can trust the product. The product complies with the requirements set out for that industry in which the product is being offered. And lastly, that companies that affiliate with us have to ensure that they help us preserve the environment through their practices, being recycling, reusing of waste, disposing of waste responsibly, and ensuring that they help us reduce the carbon footprint. And lastly, they must ensure that they treat their workers fairly and in accordance with the prescriptions of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. SMEs are important in helping to turn the tide. If you look at developed economies, as high as 90% of contribution to the economies, to those developed economies, comes from SMEs. With us, we're lagging far behind. We're still trying to get to the target set out in the NDP. And if you look at the SME support ecosystem, you have programs, both financial and non-financial programs that are out there, both in the public sector and the private sector, that are aimed at supporting SMEs. They give you information, they help you comply with statutory obligations, they help drive your productivity up, help you comply, give you overall support through ESD programs and some of those programs that exist out there. There's issues around registering IP and trademarks. Then funding is important, but you can have all of this. But the most important thing is you need people to buy from you, and that is where Proudly South African comes from. In that we help with access to markets. We utilize our mandate to help drive access to markets. So as I hasten towards concluding my presentation, I want to quickly give you a sense of how, as Proudly South African, we utilize our mandate to support you as business people. We're encouraging you to go into this industry, to find the opportunities in this industry. And so what is the role that we're going to play as Proudly South African? Within the private sector, we have started, and we started this campaign in 2018, but we're accelerating this campaign over the last 2 years or so, where we're asking the private sector to commit to job creation. And these are just some of the examples of how we go into the private sector and we ask them to commit to job creation. We ask the banks to look at furniture, uniform, promotional material, stationery that they're buying, and to buy those locally. Independent schools and privately owned schools, to look at all of those items, uniform, furniture, reading material. We ask the private hospitals and the independent hospital groups to look at their linen, their beds, their uniform, medical equipment, medical devices, pharmaceutical products, PPE, and we look at in the automotive industry. We've asked them to give us commitment that they will buy their components where they're available in the country locally, that they will utilize machinery that is sourced locally where it's available, that the uniform and overalls and protective clothing that is worn by their staff will be sourced locally. With retailers, they have a responsibility as well. We've asked them to increase levels of local content on their shelves, so that consumers can easily find those products, but also those people who are employed in the companies that manufacture these products, as they remain employed, they will then be in a position to can afford that which is sold by the retailers. So retailers have an important part to play. Manufacturers equally asked to look at their raw materials, their packaging, their components, and to source this locally. And these are just some of the commitments. So we've even come up with a system known as MAP. And I just want to play a quick video that gives you a sense of what MAP is, and then I can quickly come back and finish.
Large companies operating in South Africa recognize the long-term strategic benefit of current legislation focusing on transformation and corporate responsibility to localize supply chains beyond philanthropic reasons and to comply with the legislation. Corporates are increasingly investing in enterprise and supply development initiatives. However, a number of challenges remain. Finding vetted manufacturers according to local content requirements at acceptable industry standard levels of quality with the capacity to keep up with demand required from large organizations. Finding high-performing, transformed suppliers across all categories, bridging the gap between buyers' expectations and suppliers' capabilities, and suppliers' over-reliance on limited key accounts. Searching for suppliers is a key step in the procurement process. The suppliers need to meet the company's expectations regarding cost, capacity, quality, deadline, as well as performance. Introducing Market Access Platform, your preferred portal to source localized and transformed suppliers. Market Access Platform, MAP, is an online portal that influences localization and transformation. It enables corporates to refer, find, and rate vetted high-performing transformed suppliers, local service providers, and manufacturers across industries, thereby creating market access for suppliers while mitigating the risks associated with sourcing from unfamiliar companies. Buyers are able to find reliable and vetted localized and transformed suppliers, refer their high-performing transformed suppliers, local manufacturers, and service providers to MAP, thereby enabling them to grow and become more competitive. Advertise procurement opportunities. Support the growth of their own high-performing suppliers. Increase competitiveness in sourcing. Reduce the cost of sourcing. Rate services received from suppliers. View the socio-economic impact of their commercial activity with selected suppliers. And record and monitor their localization procurement commitments. Suppliers are able to increase their visibility in a cross-industry marketplace, find other suppliers to procure from, and view tenders when published. Benefits and unique selling proposition. Buyer benefits. Contribute towards a localized and transformed supply chain. Retain and create jobs. Enable the sustainability of suppliers by creating market access opportunities. And contribute to the growth of the economy by favoring local manufacturers and service providers by increasing local demand. Supplier benefits. Corporate visibility. Gauge client satisfaction. B2B opportunities, buying from other suppliers. And attend proudly South African events and be exposed to the collective National Buy Local campaign, calling on both private and public sectors, as well as consumers, to procure locally. We are therefore calling on corporate South Africa to review and secure procurement practices and give preference in all cases possible to companies that are manufacturing locally. Utilize MAP to influence localization and transformation. Refer and find high-performing suppliers. Advertise procurement opportunities. And record and monitor localization procurement commitments. Market Access Platform, your preferred portal to source localized and transformed suppliers.
Okay, so that's the Market Access Platform. It's a portal that we've created to enable the private sector to find suppliers. So just to summarize what we do in the private sector, we go out and we ask the private sector to give us commitments of items that they're going to buy locally, identify these and ring-fence these and afford these procurement opportunities to local producers only, to those who are going to supply them with locally made products. The role of Proudly South African is then to identify suitable companies on our database and in partnership with industry bodies, as well as the DTIC sector desks, and to list these suppliers on MAP, because then the corporates and buyers can also register on MAP, as you've seen on the video. They will then utilize MAP to find suppliers. If you do a search on MAP, you can extend it to not just looking for a supplier that will supply you with, let's say we're talking energy storage batteries or solar panels, and that supplier will then come up, and you can then extend the search to say, I want to find a supplier in my town, a supplier that is, a women-owned business, a youth-owned business, whatever your criteria is in line with your transformation, objectives as an organization, you can find those suppliers. What this does, it enables the companies, the buyers representing the companies, both big and small, to find suppliers that they can buy from. And knowing that the product has been vetted by Proudly South African, is indeed a locally made product. We then do evaluation and monitoring in that regard. We also do targeted marketing where we pair companies with suppliers. We do pitching sessions. This is just an example of what we do with the Franchise Association of South Africa. This is another industry that can't afford to have their businesses close at any given time in the day because of load shedding, and so there is a need by these kind of companies to find suppliers that can help them with alternative energy solutions. And so what we've done in the past, and 2 months ago, we had one of the sessions where we took 20 companies to go and pitch to buyers and franchisors and franchisees, pitch their offerings. And so this is another opportunity that is available to proudly South African member companies. We have created portals. When COVID-19 first hit our shores, there was a need for those wanting to buy local, looking for these items, because remember there were global supply chain disruptions. And so some of this stuff was not necessarily coming in as we wanted, cloth, face masks, hand sanitizers, detergents, face shields, medical PPE. They were not coming in as we wanted. And so they needed to be, internal capacity built up. Security of supply is quite important in all industries. And so as we saw many players, repurposing their businesses, manufacturing these items, there was a need to have a central place where any buyer sitting in the country would know that if I go to this portal or go to this place, I will find local producers of these items. And that was the purpose of our portal. So we created portals. They live on our website, both medical and non-medical PPE. You can find all of these items, and we have capacity to create many more portals. We can create portals for energy items. We are currently working on building up our portal for furniture. And so this is another industry that we're willing to support as we get more and more companies registering with us that are manufacturing each of those products that are linked to the alternative sources of energy that I alluded to earlier on. We can create a portal so that anyone who wants to buy these items buy those locally made ones can go to the portals and find them. I have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to quickly touch on the public sector. The public sector has designated items that they're going to buy locally. Look at number 19, solar water heaters. That's another item that government designated as far back as 2012. They said if they buy these items, they're going to buy it locally. And so if you are supplying those kind of items, you need to ensure that you register on the CSD, you put yourself in a position where you can respond to those tenders, because government has designated these items as those that it will definitely or only buy from local producers. Even if you're an entrepreneur, a tenderpreneur as they are known, and you're a middleman, what you deliver to government ultimately has to come from within the borders of South Africa. So we then, on the back of the procurement opportunities issued by government, advertised by state entities, we track those tenders for those designated items. In this instance, we will look out for the solar water heaters tenders or requests for quotes. We'll then identify local manufacturers who can then respond to those tenders. We will send those tenders to them and say, as a member of Public South African that makes this product, we know you registered with us. Here's an opportunity for you to go and bid. But the parallel process to that is that we then reach out to the state entity, and we through the DTIC's division that looks at industrial procurement, we then engage the state entity. And for lack of a better example, I'll say the city of Tshwane will say you've issued a tender for solar water heaters. In the tender itself, it did not specify that you're only going to look at bids from those who are going to supply you with locally made products. We assist them with correcting the bids. Sometimes they withdraw the tenders and reissue them correctly. Sometimes they don't, withdraw the tender. They just issue an addendum to the tender such that importers know that they can participate. What this does is that we will have contacted the local producers to bid. We'll have told government to only award this to local bidders. And so by doing that, we ensure that government buys locally. The last focus area for Public South African is consumers. We have an online strategy that will help us broaden the presence of South African made products on different online stores. So we have a lot of partnerships that we are currently concluding. And in the new year, we are going to start announcing those partnerships. A lot of members are now on different online platforms. That is a benefit that you have. In the interest of time, I won't necessarily go into all of them. The benefit you have as a member of Public South African is if you want to sell, whether it's business to business targeted product, consumer targeted product, we can give you the opportunity through the partnerships we have to sell your products on online platforms. And we are in the process of coming up with our own online store. The process is underway, and we are looking to make some announcements come 2023 in that regard. We also go out and educate consumers on the importance of buying local through mall activations, through university activations, festival activations. We use expos for this. We run online competitions. We work with the unions as part of our labor mobilization drive for them to talk to their employers about the importance of them buying their components and raw materials and consumables locally. We do consumer advertising. We rely on sporting events as well. I want to quickly play this ad, Jeremy, and then I'll then wrap up. It basically sums up for the benefit of those who are coming across Proudly South African and its mandate for the first time. It basically sums up a lot of the things that I touched on, though the focus for today was on energy as well as access to markets.
The second half is about to begin. We need to change the scoreboard. It's time for all of us to pause and rethink the game plan in order to save the future. I call on all of us to be game changers, because greatness isn't reserved only for some people. By buying local, we're choosing to create jobs and sustain the ones we have. Time and time again, South Africans have taken destiny into their own hands, creating products that the rest of the world wanted to buy. See, the world remembers about us what we sometimes forget, but it's time for change. Let's all buy local. It's game time. Zanzi.
Local is lekker.
Your everyday decisions shape our future.
Indeed, the King of Wakanda has spoken. Who am I to dispute what the King of Wakanda is saying? Your everyday decisions shape our future. So choose to buy locally made products and help us turn the economy around. Here I'm preempting that the question might come up later, and so I've left this slide for last. There's perception that it's expensive to affiliate with Proudly South African. It's not. For companies with turnover less than 5 million rands, it's 500 rands per annum. And as you see, between 5 million and 10 million is 1,000 rands. And the most that any company that affiliates with us will ever pay is 100,000 rands as a membership fee, that is. And this is for companies with turnovers of 100 million rands and more. If you want to become a member of Proudly South African, if you want to work with us, if you want to utilize our platforms to find suppliers or to be listed there on so that buyers can find you, contact us, info@proudlysa.co.za. Proudlysa.co.za is where you can find a lot of our information. Follow us on social media at ProudlySA. 011-327-7778 is our contact details. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate the time. I think I'm about 3 minutes over my time. Apologies for that, but I thought it was important that I comprehensively deal with the mandate as well as what the offerings are to those who are in business and who see this as a potential market opportunity for them. Yeah, thank you.
Eustace, don't worry about the time. It's an important, powerful, and impactful message. Once again, I just want to say, every time I see that Proudly South African ad, I know it was made a while back and it addressed COVID-specific concerns, but man, it still remains a very, very powerful piece of commercial communication and just as relevant now as I think it was when it was made. You made some very important points about energy, and the main takeout here is that manufacturing and success in doing business is predicated on energy and the consistency of power. In order to do that, Eustace, we've got to become self-reliant. We've got to find solutions that work for us. But most importantly, I think, and this is what we're going to explore now with our next lot of speakers, is they have to be cost effective, but I'm also going to suggest they have to be easy to use. You have to understand it. I've just installed an inverter in my home, and one needed a physics degree from MIT before I actually understood how this thing worked. I know things have become a little bit simpler, but cost effective and easy to work, and that enables the smooth transition and continuation of business. So that's the Chief Executive Officer of Proudly South African, Eustace Mashimbe. Thank you very much indeed. Now what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to get to our guest speakers, and we have 3 lined up for you today. So it's my great pleasure, first of all, to introduce you to Eddie Mokobodi, who is founder of Sakisa. It is an energy solutions company. He will go into the details as far as that's concerned. His organization is a proudly South African member. He will present to you, then we'll move on to our next 2 presenters. Then what I'll try and do is to pull it all together in a short conversation with the different constituents once we get to that point. Just to remind you, friends and colleagues, our team at Proudly South African closely monitoring that Q&A facility that we've got on the webinar. If you've got questions, you just put them in there, and I can see that they're answering as quickly as possible. And once we get to the conversation itself, if you want to chip in, if there's anything you want to ask, if there's anything you want to agree with or disagree with, we'll get to that a little bit later. But Eddie, let's move on to you. And as I said a little earlier, the virtual floor is yours.
All right. Morning, everybody. Am I heard clearly?
Loud and clear, and let's keep going.
Perfect. Okay, so my name's Eddie. I've got a company called Sakisa Energy, and we offer solar solutions to homes and businesses. So I'll just continue to just share my screen quickly. Okay, here we go. Let me know if that's quite visible there, Jeremy. All right. Okay, so we are Sakisa Energy and Technology Group, and we are an SMME in South Africa. And we've been offering solar solutions for the commercial and industrial space, as well as residential. We are also registered with SANEDI as a Tier 2 ESCO. We are 100% Black youth owned, and we've been helping customers seek energy solutions actively since 2019. We also have a PV green card, which is now the new measure for the solar industry, or the standard for the solar industry. As you might be aware, that there are a lot of businesses that have entered the space, and it's a good place to begin by looking for service providers who have the PV green card, because that shows you that they're qualified to install a solar system to your business or home, thus reducing your risk of your project. Okay, and our mission is to just be a catalyst in the economic growth of South Africa and Africa. I like what Mr. Eustace said, where he said, for manufacturing to happen, you really need consistent power supply. So we just want to be a company or a business that facilitates that process, because our country needs to industrialize, we need to grow our sectors. And for that to happen, you need energy. And that's where we come in. We just want to be there when clients can and will need to be able to industrialize by using us as a provider. And one of our visions is to bring access to power, technology, and energy to everyone in South Africa. Our core services include solar PV, solar rooftop PV, as well as battery backup solutions. We offer homes and businesses with solar and battery solutions to reduce the consumption, reduce effects of power blackouts, and what makes us unique is that we tailor-make solutions to meet our clients' needs. We've got a director, we've got various teams on site, we handle our marketing, and we've got teams of installers across 4 to 5 provinces at the moment. Within South Africa. And some of our value propositions is to transform South Africa's demand from fossil fuels to solar PV, to make things a lot more sustainable and bringing renewable energy to homes and businesses so we can help them become sustainable. We do understand that there's a huge opportunity for energy security, the access to clean and reliable energy, as our current power utility is still projected to have challenges with providing electricity for some more years to come. Just a few things that we've also helped with regards to seeing the Proudly South African mandate is we've helped some businesses save on their electricity costs and reduce their downtime due to load shedding by helping them with solar systems and battery solutions. Thus, they don't have to cut jobs or cut processes, and their output can remain the same and potentially still grow as their needs grow as well. So I've kept it quite short, but it's very straightforward. We offer solutions to homes and businesses across the country. Our contact details are over there as well. And thank you very much, Jeremy and the Proudly SA team.
Eddie, thank you very much indeed for the quick overview. Stand by, continue to keep your screen on, because we'll get back to you in a short time when we start our conversation. So thank you very much indeed. Very insightful, and we've certainly got a good idea of what you do, but most importantly, the role that you can play in helping small business, because as I said in my introduction, Eddie, it's smaller businesses are the ones that tend to fall over first when we have this continued blackouts or load shedding. So it really is a problem. Stand by. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to introduce you now to Mamiki Matlawa, who is the Group Business Development Executive of Actom, as she will also explore the importance of a solar strategy, of a solar solution, with particular reference to small business. Mamiki, a very good morning to you, and let's hear what you have to say.
Good morning, Jeremy, and thanks for allowing me this virtual platform, and thank you to Proudly SA for this particular opportunity. I would like to share my presentation. Okay, thank you very much. Why should businesses invest in solar? So my content would look at, as introduced, I'm from Actom, what Actom is about, our presence in Southern Africa, our focus on renewable energy, and exactly our core strategy in terms of our customer focus, and look at some of our divisions. And I think most importantly for this particular webinar, we first look at what is the current energy situation for businesses and explore why solar installation as a business case. Okay, so Actom we are the largest local manufacturer, solution provider, repairer, maintainer, and a distributor of electromechanical equipment in Africa. Our main factory is based in Knights in Ekurhuleni, which is about 240,000 square meters. In terms of what we're about, key data, our current order intake is over 10 billion rand per annum. We employ approximately 6,280 employees, thus getting us to a salary wage bill of over 1.8 billion per annum. We've invested in the country, in our factories, over 3 billion rand since 2002, and currently increasing our capex to currently 810 million since 2002. And we've also increased floor spaces in excess of 70,000 square meters. I think in the context of a manufacturing and a repairer company, that's quite big. We're quite a significant regional economic player, so we committed to localization. skills and technology transfer. We have 37 operating units, 54 production, service and repair facilities. And we also have distribution centers, about 33 of them, that is quite easily available, especially to SMMEs that are in the electricity contracting space. We've got subsidiaries in Zimbabwe, Namibia, Zambia, Botswana, and DRC, and have representation in most of African countries, Australia, USA, and Indonesia. We've set up 2 skills training centers, one at our nice factory in Germiston, training artisans, electricians, mechanical fitters, and also one in our Denver factory, LHM, which mainly supports the P1 and P2 students. We are a level 1 B company and have a number of social responsibility projects, mainly focusing on schools, working at building capacity, especially in the maths and science, in the science students. We also quite multi-branded. We own most of the brands that you can see here, and also have representation in some of them. And on renewable energy, we have been involved in especially the RE-IPP program since, program 1, which was in 2011. We've got a valuable contribution towards the IPP localization on procurement of goods and services. We also, being a big major supplier of electrical equipment and balance of plant to EPCs, and we provide of maintenance and refurbishment of plant. And approximately 95% of solar and wind farms in South Africa use ECTOM's NEC transformers. We are able to support all the various technologies involved in the renewable energy, wind, solar, CSP, biomass, hydropower, landfill, and cogeneration. So in summary, we supply a complete range of high quality, reliable, and cost-effective products and services, has in-depth engineering skills and close ties with technology partners, and is able to explore innovative solutions for the benefit of customers. I think our long-term strategy is on local content, but at an improved competitiveness. We provide customers with full turnkey electromechanical solutions. And we've got about 13 divisions with various business units. Some of them would be your John Thompson, which looks at the boilers. We've got MV switchgears. We involve power transformers. So the whole transmission and distribution aspect of electricity generation, we supply major equipment in that space, but we also have quite a number of repair facilities. For instance, in the LH Martinezin, we repair transformers, motors. We also do fan services. We are also involved in the rail part of things in terms of signaling, as well as tractional motors. We repair that. So that's basically ECTOM as a whole. So when it comes to businesses to start looking at solar PV as an option, or as an alternative to the current energy crisis, I think one needs to look at what are the current energies situation that the businesses are facing. We've seen massive tariff hikes. We currently on load shedding stage 3 at the moment. There's also implication for carbon taxes for those that are big emitters. So I'll share with you some of the stats in terms of looking at those 3 aspects. The electricity price hikes in South Africa for the past 10 years, it has outpaced inflation. If you look at the bottom graph here, the tariff increases have increased to about 356 as opposed to inflation at 74% over the past 30 years. What then does is that businesses are then forced to either push down those particular increases to the consumer. The consumer in turn also feels the pressure and either start switching to different products or services, or utilize those particular products and services less and less and less. And we then have a ever-ending cycle of unemployment and poverty. We currently sitting in, I think this was in September 2022, 5,761 hours of load shedding, as opposed to, if you look at when we first started around 2008, we only had about 192 hours of load shedding, and we now almost jumped quite a lot to 5,761. That disturbs manufacturing, that disturbs business operations. Carbon taxes is another factor that business need to start looking at. So it was introduced in 2019 in response to the commitments that South Africa has made in Paris in 2015. Basically, what that means is that for future carbon emitters, the tax will be higher specifically for those that are not looking to switch, or those that are not willing to switch in terms of their emissions. If you look at the graph on my right, you will see that the proposal from Treasury is to progressively increase the carbon tax price every year by at least $1 to reach $20 per ton of carbon dioxide emissions by 2026. This means that in 4 years, assuming that an exchange rate of 15 rand to the US dollar, the carbon price will sit at about 300 rand per ton of carbon dioxide emissions, almost double today's rate. And I think looking at those particular issues that I've mentioned for businesses, it looks like a no-brainer. So investment in solar by businesses generally saves the business about 15%, average of 15% in electricity costs, with the system sometimes paying for itself within the 3 to 12 years of installation, and providing almost free energy for nearly 15 years, depending on how you have installed your system. Further business case for solar is that there's less red tape in terms of installation. Government has removed the threshold of installation of 100 megawatts by removing the need to do an onerous NESA generation license. We normally have an average to most European countries and most in the top. We've got sunshine, which is always available. The cost of the technology of solar is improving, and the costs are decreasing at the same time. The technology is improving, costs are decreasing. It's good for the environment. I think if you look at what the country has experienced in April this year, and some of what since the rainy season has started, it is clear that if we do not do anything, when I say what we experienced in April during the KZN floods, it is clear that if we do not do anything to the environment, we'll continue to suffer, these kind of natural disasters. There is good longevity in terms of the solar. So if you basically, I think if properly maintained, your solar panels can last about 20 to 30 years. And if you have managed to invest in a good quality battery as well, you're looking at about 15 years of that. Solar PV is finance friendly. Businesses or banks are looking at how to best finance this. And we're seeing more and more banks looking at providing finance for this. It's also flexible and scalable. You can decide to do a grid tied where you install, but you do backup of that from what you get from the grid. You can decide to completely go off grid, or you can just use it as a backup and increase as and when you're able to do that. There's tax incentives for businesses to do that. So in 2016, Treasury introduced a new policy to allow for a full depreciation of the full cost of the grid tied of less than 1 megawatt. So this allows you to deduct the cost of your solar installation from your taxable income in the year of its commissioning, meaning you can able to claim about 100% of your solar installation. And I think there's nothing more attractive than that. For larger carbon emitters, the tax benefits is on your carbon tax. You pay less carbon tax in terms of that. And, most of the solar installation are really not that complex. As ECTOM, what we have decided to do as well, we've decided to do two things. Firstly, I have indicated the size of our manufacturing facilities, and we've got about, as I indicated, about close to about 57 manufacturer repairers in some of the distribution centers. So far, we have already installed a 200 watts roof mount, which is tied to the local mini substation for self-consumption at one of our factories in Sasolburg. We are busy with the 1.1 megawatt installation at our main facility in Nice in Ekurhuleni to be completed 2021. And as we've also realized that because of our capability within the electromechanical equipment space to start investing in businesses to do that for other businesses in terms of installing solar and its required backup and in terms of batteries and all that, either for grid tied or either for tying to the diesel generators or however, anyway, that business is looking to do. Yeah, so in closing, the financial and environmental drivers are without doubt, why businesses need to switch to solar at this particular moment. I thank you for this opportunity.
And Mamiki, we thank you for that overview as well. Mamiki, we'll get back to you in just a moment as we continue our conversation. By the way, I just want to say this, the sun and solar is a sure bet. I was chatting to a friend of mine recently who is in the astronomy department at a university, and he says that the sun has still got something like 5 billion years to go. So the reality is, it's not our problem as long as we harness the rays of energy that come from the sun. Just before I introduce you to our next guest, I also regularly host a session with entrepreneurs, and this will also inform our conversation a little bit later. And I was doing one recently about tech solutions within the entrepreneurial space. So read into that, the small business space. And there's an interesting formula that we can talk about a little bit later. It's called the PACT formula. Essentially, you got a plan. So we're going to talk a little bit later about what kind of strategies we need in place. Then you've got to have the courage to do it. There's so much fear regarding new technology. Then you've got to action it. So PAC, action, is the PAC part of it. And then you've also got to make sure that we live in an organic business environment. So it's important then that we tweak it. So planning, courage, action, and tweaking the PAC formula when it comes to the implementation of new solutions, something I think will help small businesses a great deal. So Mamiki, thank you very much indeed. You can put your camera off for the moment. We'll get back to you in just a moment as our webinar continues. By the way, just to remind you, any questions that you've got, you see the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, or at least it's at the bottom of my screen, and our team at Proudly South African are monitoring that constantly as well. Now, let me introduce to you Annelies van der Merwe, who is Director Green Industries at the DTIC's Invest SA division. And we're going to take a look at another perspective, another paradigm as far as effective energy implementation is concerned. Annelies, good morning.
Morning, Jeremy, and thank you everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I don't have slides to share this morning, but I'm just going to very briefly talk to you about some of the initiatives that we are involved in as the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and support that is provided especially to businesses in the solar sector. So maybe just to give some context, I work for a branch of the DTIC called Invest SA, and our mandate is really to support both foreign and domestic companies in navigating the business environment, understanding where the opportunities are, and then a large part of our role is also to facilitate, to unblock, to fast track, to remove red tape, and really to ensure that we create a conducive business environment for all companies operating in South Africa. Now, I head up the green economy team at Invest SA, and we look at a range of opportunities across the green economy sector, but renewable energy and then solar PV is really one of the areas where we've seen massive growth in the last number of years, and really where we also see opportunities, especially for South African businesses and South African developed technology, to play a very important part. So one of the first initiatives that I want to talk about briefly is the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan. I think Eustace spoke in his opening remarks around the very important role that industrialization needs to play in our country's economic development. To this end, the department has developed and is developing, in collaboration with other government departments, a number of master plans that's really a social compact, and that's really provides an industrialization plan. So the Renewable Energy Master Plan is really focused at trying to identify the opportunities all along the value chain, trying to identify along the different nodes in this value chain where companies can really access opportunities. And I think I'll speak to that a little bit later. Sorry, I seem to be losing my voice. And then what we have also seen is we have been working with a number of companies. For example, Ms. Matlwa was talking about the opportunities in the commercial and industrial rooftop space. As Invest SA, we have assisted a number of companies to navigate the regulatory environment in either setting up systems themselves or to help companies that provide these systems to navigate the regulatory environment, for example, dealing with municipalities, wheeling related requirements in terms of installing solutions, etc. And then most recently, I think many of us are aware that the cap for self-generation has now been removed, and we are eagerly awaiting the updated regulations that will be issued by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. But one of the sectors that's really taken up the opportunity and the challenge to use this opportunity is the mining sector. And some of the statements that they've made is that they will be procuring in excess of 2 gigawatts of renewable energy. Mostly this will be the main renewable energy technologies, solar, PV and wind, but then also including other opportunities like battery storage, looking at cogeneration with diesel generators, etc. So I think that provides a great opportunity. I think the investment value for that 2 gigawatts is estimated somewhere between 20 and 40 billion rand. So that's really a massive opportunity that local service providers can access. So just to briefly talk about the value chain that we see, and that's also one of the areas that we focus on in the Renewable Energy Master Plan, is if you look at how a renewable energy project is really developed, you have the planning stage, you have the procurement phase, you have the manufacturing, so the production of components, that's another opportunity. You have transport of the equipment to the site, installation, grid connection, operation and maintenance, and then finally decommissioning. We heard that these systems last on average 15 years. So at the end of it, the new equipment needs to be installed, systems need to be decommissioned. So at each stage of this value chain, there are a number of opportunities that that companies can access. And as Investors A and the DTIC, we are really eager to support companies and to help them understand where these opportunities are. Yunus also in his opening remark spoke about designation. A number of years, the DTIC also designated rooftop PV systems, and that looks at the entire system. And for example, the mounting structure, the rooftop, the actual PV panel, the inverter, etc. So we have been working with a number of companies that produce these components locally. Currently, there are 2 companies that produce PV panels, for example, locally, and we would encourage engagement with them to understand the value that these locally produced products offer. And then I was also asked to just briefly touch on some of the funding and financing opportunities. So as the DTIC, we obviously support companies through the industrial financing branch. There are some incentives available depending on the sector that companies operate in, depending on the type of activities that they engage in. So we would be happy to refer them to the relevant teams within the department. We also work within the development finance ecosystem with the Industrial Development Corporation, Development Bank of Southern Africa, the National Empowerment Fund. So again, very happy to make connections within the ecosystem. And then lastly, one of the areas that we have also been participating in actively over the last few months is, you may be aware that the President established a National Energy Crisis Committee to address the severe impact that our energy supply challenges currently have on the economy, and a number of working groups have been established. So, for example, there is a working group that looks at how we remove red tape, how we make it easier. And then I also want to encourage companies to make use of the doingbusiness.org.za website. That is a collaborative effort between us as Investors A, the CIPC, and a number of other entities to provide advice, services, linking companies directly to the Biz portal where they can register a company, and really access a lot of the reports that we produce. It also links to the Investors A website where we have a number of value propositions and contact details of our colleagues that can provide support to companies. So that's really in a nutshell. Jeremy, thank you very much.
Annelies, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask you to keep your camera on if you can. Also, Eddie and Mamiki, if you'll join me in a quick conversation, and Eustace, if at any point as the Chief Executive Officer of Proudly South African, you want to hop into the conversation as well, please feel free to do so. Maybe as a starting point, let me say this. There was a very telling editorial in one of the daily newspapers recently about the stress around blackouts, around load shedding, and it effectively said this, and I will summarize. It said, as businesses, we need to recalibrate our expectations. We have to accept the fact that we are operating, we are manufacturing, we are selling, we are servicing within a new lived reality. And the call on all of us now as business people in South Africa is to be more strategic. We need to think differently. And then there was a very interesting point that was made in this editorial that also said that unless we start shifting the way in which we think and operate, it's actually going to have an impact on our mental health. And I'm a big proponent of good mental health, because good mental health, I think, also leads to successful business. So we have to work within a new system. And that's exactly the reason why Proudly South African is hosting this this webinar today. So maybe as a starting point, and Eddie, let me come back to you. You're operating, by all accounts, a very successful and efficient business. But talk to us from the perspective of what your clients are saying to you. How are they feeling the pain? What impact is the energy deficiency having on their business? What, Eddie, is their lived reality right now? Maybe let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, so our clients, they're driven by, I think, 2 or 3 key frustrations. The first one is the load shedding, the blackouts. So that affects homes and businesses. And I think the lack of predictability behind that. So the problem is not only just the blackout, the problem is also the fact that you can't plan for next week because you don't know what's going to happen next week. Or in a month's time, or Christmas, we all don't know if we'll be able to microwave food on Christmas Day and at what time. So I think that's a big frustration, them not being able to plan and also factor in when and what time is this load shedding going to happen and how constant will it be. That's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of businesses have spent a lot more time being online. Since COVID, a lot of companies have obviously had more meetings online. We've got this webinar online. And that is a big issue because if you've got a load shedding schedule set up, you've got people in different blocks whereby we're all not going to be load shed at the exact same time. You might be in the middle of load shedding right now and you have your inverter on, but maybe your colleagues might not have an inverter or a solar system to keep them on. So that also brings a lot of inefficiencies. So in terms of the business side, it's not easy to plan around the load shedding. And then for the residential clients, they also started to work from home this year. A lot of people are working from home. We've seen that with a lot of our clients, and they just don't want to be disconnected or put off at any given point in time. So they want to be able to do their job the same way they would, as efficiently at the office, without the issue of having to stop working for 2 or 4 hours a day. So those 2 frustrations. And then we've got the increasing power costs. So that is a big concern. The economy is still under pressure. People haven't exactly gotten much richer in the last few years. So there is that fear that the cost of electricity is rising. And how do they mitigate their risk to that? Businesses, the electricity is an input cost for businesses, and that is a big concern. And then for residential clients, they obviously have a household budget and they can't keep up with the rising electricity costs. So we see that as the two big frustrations that drive clients towards us.
I do want to reference a little later cost and financing, because that is critical to this entire debate. But maybe, Eustace, a view from you very quickly, as someone with a broader overview. You interact with a lot of businesses. 2 words that Eddie used, one word that he used twice, should I say, to get it right, was the word predictability. Any business's success is dependent on consistency. The problem is lack of predictability. The moment we get predictability into the equation, the more successful we're going to become. When you're interacting with Proudly South African businesses, what are they telling you?
In fact, I think this has added to the policy uncertainty that we've always had. You know, there's talk about an investment strike. People are saying this unpredictability is even making it difficult for them to invest, because no one is going to invest in any business where there's no certainty that you'll be able to keep, producing or rendering services, where you'll be able to keep your doors open so that your customers can access what your the offerings that you have, and you just will not invest, whether financially, whether through technology and skills, in anything where there's no certainty. So that is the biggest addition to the previous basket that we had, where companies said to us, policy uncertainty is a problem, we can't even invest. And now added to this, I had that slide that spoke about the transversal things that needs to be taken care of. It's energy. We had water about 2 months ago. So it's a big problem. This energy thing is a big problem. Hence the need for a conversation like this to say to people, there is an alternative. And I like the slide that Mamiki had, apologies. Mamiki had a slide that gave you the benefits of solar. And one of those benefits touches on the fact that you can really invest in this and know that you then create predictability for yourself and certainty for yourself. And over time, and this is one of the things that I know with investment in solar, is that investment, you will then be able to reap over time. It sits in your balance sheet, so it doesn't cost you much that over the long term you can't recoup. It sits in your balance sheet. It also reduces that which you are going to pay to whoever takes care of the grid, and Eskom or City Power, whoever it is. So it's an investment worth making, because that way you've created predictability for yourself. But more than anything, it's not money wasted. Over time, the money that you would have paid to Eskom, which was never going to come back to you, is money that you're spending on a solution that sits in your balance sheet and helps you run your business continuously. And those companies that we engage with that have invested in this are giving us that kind of feedback. Sure.
All right, Mamiki, let me put this to you. And again, I come back to that entrepreneurial formula that I mentioned a little earlier: planning, having the courage to implement, actioning it, in other words, implementing it, and then making sure that you're following the continuum all the way, that you're able to make changes, you're able to tweak it. And I think that is very applicable to what we're talking about today. So let's get into the nuts and bolts now. We are in common agreement that we're only going to achieve success when there is predictability, whether it's policy predictability, whether it is simply predictability as far as businesses' own solutions are concerned. So Mamiki, when clients come to you, often they're ignorant. They don't know about this. They're entering into uncharted territory. What advice are you giving them in order to develop an effective strategy to start going off the grid? What are you telling them? What are they asking you?
I think what we're telling them, which is, I think Mr. Mashimbe has indicated at the beginning, is that for the reasons that I've highlighted in terms of what is the current impact of not doing anything. We've spoken about the increases in tariffs, to then have a ripple effect in terms of you having access, you having less clients, you having challenges in terms of business sustainability, some predictability in terms of load shedding, which what we're also seeing, Jeremy, which is quite interesting during load shedding, is that the systems, especially the system for utilities, they were not, as much as they were designed a long time ago, and they were not geared for shutdowns, start again, and therefore the system, opposed to if you are scheduled to come back at 2 p.m., now you have a delay because the municipality can't get you back up. at the time. And you might find yourself in a situation that, you know what, after the meeting or start production and deliver to my client at a certain time, but you're not able to in that particular time. So those are the, I think we talk about what is likely to be an impact in terms of your business if nothing has changed in terms of you looking to have a much more sustainable energy supply or a so those are some of the, you know, the things that we're telling, you know, our clients.
All right, Mamiki, thank you very much. I'm also getting a sign on my laptop that your network bandwidth at the moment is low. So very happy just to listen to you if you want to save a little bandwidth by turning off your camera. The great thing about these webinars is we navigate our way through the difficulties as best we can. Annelies, let me bring you into this conversation now. What do people then need to be thinking about if they're wanting to make a change from the traditional to renewable? What needs to be going through their head? What decisions do they need to be thinking about making?
Thanks, Jeremy. So you know, I think whilst we were having the conversation and the other panelists were talking, I think the one thing that keeps on coming up in my mind is resilience. We really need to build in resilience in companies and how companies make decisions, and that is not only from an energy point of view, but in future, you know, if you look at the potential impact of climate change, especially in Southern Africa, I think it's really a big focus in terms of resource efficiency. So there's an organization based in the Western Cape called Green Cape that they, a number of years ago, developed a toolkit to help companies make decisions in terms of renewable energy installation. They operate nationally, even though they're based in the Western Cape, but they have developed a free sort of CEO toolkit that helped companies to understand, what do you do first? Do I first go and ensure that my business is, for example, energy efficient? Do I look at installing LED lighting, for example? And then secondly, then you go over and you decide, okay, am I doing a PV installation? It all depends on the activities that you are involved in. Are you manufacturing? Is it a services entity? That would really determine what solution you go for. Do you go for PV alone to help alleviate the load during the day? Do you install a battery system to provide some additional backup power when there is load shedding, etc.? So I think those are decisions that companies need to make. Also, as the DTIC also supports the National Cleaner Production Centre, and they have in the past also assisted companies to do free resource efficiency audits. So to help companies understand where they can make tweaks, and that was also supported through the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, so sort of industrial energy efficiency program. So I think it's really understanding the company's specific needs, the activities that they are involved in, and that would really determine what, you know, the decision-making process in that specific entity.
All right, that's a very clear and cogent answer. Like any small business owner, though, or any business owner, they're always going to dive straight into cost and benefit. One of our participants in the webinar today is Tracy Lindsay. And Tracy, let's go straight for the jugular. Hi, my question to Annelies, and you touched on DTIC funding and financing. The question very simply is the funding specific to companies who wish to install alternative energy? And asks Tracy, and this is directed at you, Annelies, do you provide funding for that? Well, let's get straight into cost, shall we?
So the DTIC doesn't provide direct funding for the installation of PV systems. There has been in the past certain of our incentives where, as part of a sort of an overall package. So, for example, if you look at a tax allowance that we had in the past, the 12I tax allowance, that looked at overall energy efficiency improvement. and a solar PV system, for example, could have been included in an overhaul of a manufacturing line to make that more competitive, etc. So it's not a direct incentive for that the DTIC provides, but one of our entities, two of our entities, the National Empowerment Fund and the Industrial Development Corporation, do provide financing both through loans and equity. And we would be very happy to make those introductions.
Eddie, if a small business, in fact, let me take that out, a business is looking to make the switch, the first question anybody is going to ask is cost. Give us a rundown, and Mamiki, I'm going to come to you as well and put the same question to you. I mean, how expensive a process is that? Or can you manage it in such a way where you can step up over time?
Okay, so you've got two choices. You can do the step up, which obviously means you also delay the gratification or the juice from having the system, because you could start off with a system that takes you maybe 25% off grid, build up. What I've always advised clients is that you shouldn't cut your utility line completely, because solar PV is still weather dependent. So you might have a week of rain like we did, I think, last week. And you want to be able to tap into the existing utility to charge your batteries and keep your operations going. Solar and battery storage, yes, it is still fairly expensive depending on the size and the system and the technology.
Eddie, what does fairly expensive mean?
Okay, so for a typical household, you're looking at anything from about 80,000 Rand with lithium batteries. For a business, anything above 150,000 Rand, up to the millions, in fact, depending on what's happening and how big the business is. So not a lot of people have 80 or 90,000 Rand lying around. So you probably can start with a battery backup unit and then add solar onto that later, and then maybe add more solar and then more battery as you sort of build that system up. And the same would go for a business. You could probably start off with, if it's a smallish business, maybe start off by having enough battery storage for the office or the central computer systems where maybe those guys can't be offline. So the admin block, for example, and then add up to the other operations as you go on. And yeah, the choice of technology and the building blocks of it is also quite critical in drawing that sort of roadmap to say, okay, if you've got this amount of budget right now, let's just meet you where we can with that exact budget.
Eddie, I'm going to interrupt you there. I want to get to choice of technology a little bit later. Let's deal with the cost issue right now. Mamiki, I'm assuming that if you're going to get the cost right, you've almost got to plot a graph of cost and kind of desirable output in terms of managing your business. And when those two graphs intersect, that's the sweet spot. That's where you can spend the money in order to gain maximum benefit. What advice do you give your clients then? And what I heard in your earlier presentation, you're a considerably bigger company than Eddie's company is. What advice do you give your clients in terms of optimum implementation?
I think optimum implementation, Jeremy, in my presentation, I spoke about the flexibility. So the way you can look at it is, for instance, if you have a diesel generator, you can implement or install your system to sort of complement with a diesel generator. We are aware that the sun doesn't shine all the time as much as we have as much sun as we have at the moment in South Africa, but it doesn't shine at the time. So it could be that, or as Eddie has advised, that do not go completely off grid, where you can tie it to your local mini substation that you provide. So those are some of the dynamics that you would need to look at. For instance, comparing the cost of diesel against the cost of grid tied. How much are you paying in terms of your current electricity prices, as opposed to what would be the calculation in terms of how much diesel would you have to spend to be able to tie it in either of those? So those are some of the the comparison that a business can make to then say, okay, fine, how do I install the solar system? And I think going completely off grid, it becomes a further expensive exercise, because you might need to add additional things in terms of maybe more solar. But I think it also depends on the kind of businesses that you have. For instance, a business that runs from your normal 9 to 5, it might be easier with the tying your solar with the generator in those kind of things. So there's quite a lot of factors that you need to look at to be able to then say, okay, this is what would be the sweet spot for me. How would I choose? What would work? What would not particularly work for my business, as I say? But remember, do not, I think there's a bigger cost to not having some sort of a backup at this particular time.
And Eustace, maybe that's a good place for you to jump in here. Mamiki couldn't say it better. You've got to almost look at the cost of doing it versus the cost of not doing it, and what the long-term negative benefit is. Because it's all very well for an organization like Proudly South African to promote buying local, to push local industry. But unless local industry is actually operating, the whole exercise is pointless. So I would suggest, Eustace, that organizations these days have no choice but to embark on the strategy, even as Eddie says, whether it's a step-up strategy or not.
In fact, Eskom has told us, Jeremy, that we are going to be here for a long time. And I think that, as a business person, is something that, if you are thinking short, medium, long term, it's definitely a benefit you should have. And in fact, in our case, when I went through my slides, I demonstrated how we go out and we secure procurement opportunities for members. You can fulfill your order because, electricity, challenges dealt you a blow. You are messing it up for everyone, in all honesty, because then, that corporate that has given an opportunity to a Proudly South African company on the back of what we have presented to them, the base of companies that we represent. If one person stuffs it up, it messes it up for everyone. And so for us, it's quite important that the companies that are affiliated with us take this very seriously, that they invest in those businesses by way of alternative energy and ensure that they can then fulfill those orders. And I'll sound like a stuck record. If you look at the slide from Mamiki, it tells you, you are not losing. It's an investment.
They're the benefits, yeah.
You are not losing. You are going to spend money on paying Eskom anyway, or whoever plugs you into the grid. In this instance, you're paying someone, but the benefit is to your own balance sheet. It's not rocket science, and I think that's the education. That's the educational element that is missing, and that's why a conversation like this, from a Proudly South African perspective, was important. And I'm glad that the panelists that we brought today touched on the importance of this and the fact that it is an investment worth making.
To all of our participants today, I do apologize for the hardy-dar noise. I have a nest just outside my office, and I wish sometimes that we could plug energy into the hardy-dars, because we would maybe that's another energy solution. Annelies, let me come back to you. It's a point that Eddie raised a little bit earlier, but I'm going to take his point and I'm going to just add in one other point. There's so much choice of technology at the moment. It's bewildering. Let's be quite honest. You also have a lot of people with commercial agendas that are trying to sell you their particular solution. Add that bewildering array of choice into just the fear of installation, and people are saying, well, I'll wait and see. And as Eustace has rightly said, we can't afford to wait and see anymore. How do you navigate around that particular conundrum?
So I think obviously there are a number of DTIC entities that are involved in standards and ensuring that we bring products in if it's not produced locally that comply to certain standards, but also that locally produced products comply to these standards. But I think one thing that Eddie mentioned that's really important to note is this PV green card. And that was actually developed also in partnership with the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association. So ensure that when you engage with installers, make sure that they have these types of certifications and engage with industry bodies like Subvia that are there to also support companies to understand the options available to them. So I think there are mechanisms that can help companies to navigate this very sort of tricky and complex environment.
Let me just unmute myself quickly. Eddie, back to you. You also referenced choice of technology. So is there a recommendation? Is there a strategic approach that you have in terms of talking to a business and saying, well, this is how I'm going to design a solution for you? Because I'm no expert here, but I'm assuming that if I'm running a small business, my needs are very different to a residential need, for instance. So how do you go about doing that?
Okay, so with regards to the choice of technology, you have to first look for tier 1 products. And those are products that have proven themselves in the marketplace and have good warranties. And we even go further and look for products that have good local presence. So it's not, a lot of people get tempted. I think maybe Eustace spoke about this, to choose the next best or the next shiniest thing that lands in the market and say, oh no, but there's this brand that just came out and this is what they promise their products can deliver. But there's nobody in the country to assist from a warranty point of view or from a technical support. So we look for technologies that have been around South Africa for a time and have some level of operations here as well. And also those that are locally manufactured, like products that Actom makes and things like that, also help, because then if there's an issue with an Actom product, you can go back to Miss Mamiki and say, hey, listen, we bought X amount of switchgear from you and it doesn't seem to be doing the job properly. Who do we talk to? So the technology needs to be proven. There are some lists now of approved inverters, panels, and batteries that is out there. I saw that the Western Cape government made a list of that. So the industry sort of follows these proven technologies. Unfortunately, what that means, there's a slightly higher cost to good quality products as opposed to things that just come in through the back door into the country or into the market that are not proven or that have false claims. And unfortunately, as a small business owner, you might be tempted to be like, but no, Eddie, I got a quote that was 10 or 15% less than yours. So I'm going to go with that guy. And the risk there is we always try and advise people that, look, if you go for that, chances are you're going to call us back because the choice of technology is not correct or the quality is not right. But what we've noticed is that there's a bigger move in the market towards getting the right products. People are becoming a lot more educated because some might have had their fingers burned, or they may have had someone they know who's chosen the wrong technology and had their fingers burned. So some of our recent inquiries, people actually tell us that, listen, I want quality before you tell me the price. So I do believe the market's sort of starting to move towards the right technology as well. the consumers who are understanding that quality pays off over just taking the cheapest thing.
It reminds me of that old retail adage that says, if it's too good to be true, chances are it's not too good to be true. The reality is you've got to, buyer beware. You've got to be very careful. Mamiki, I wonder if you have a view on this. There's an expression, and I'm afraid it escapes me, but essentially what it says is that technology is changing all the time, and as it's changing all the time, incrementally the cost is inevitably coming down. How do you navigate, or how should a consumer, how should a small business owner navigate through that when they've got a bewildering array of choice, but what is on offer is also changing all the time? I have a personal experience. Inverter, bought a lithium battery, working perfectly, wanted to put another battery in. It was an upgraded battery. It was a better battery than the previous one. The person that installed it didn't tell me that it was wrong for the inverter. And there was a great deal of pain and trauma and tears, and I'm glad to say it's been resolved. But the reality is you've got to be very careful about that. You've got to keep on top of the changing technology. In other words, Mamiki, as a consumer, as a business owner, you've got to do your own research all the time, haven't you?
No, it's true, Jeremy. You really have to do your research all the time. But also, I recently had a friend of mine, I've installed my system in the house a couple of months back, and she was aware that I've done that, and she is going across and comparing, but also talking to people who've had their system installed to then say, how did you experience? Did the what do you call the supplier do X, Y, Z? So those are the kind of, do a bit of research, try to we live in a technology world, and what I've seen as well is that people have realized that within, let's call it the World Wide Web, you can find any review on anything, that if people are not happy about your product, they definitely go in terms of care. And before you decide on a system, I think I can't emphasize that a lot. And I think what also Eddie indicated as well is the ability to have support, or let's call it technical sales support after that. You need to ask those particular questions. Is the supplier based here? What warranties do I have with this particular system? Those kind of questions that you need to sort of navigate before you decide on a system. But I've also seen, I think with some of the banks as well, if you can always check with them, because if they provide a financing for systems, they have done that cross-check reference in terms of the suppliers that they approve. And I think we will probably start going there, especially with the banks, if they're putting up the upfront capital on your behalf type of thing.
There we go. Let me unmute myself. Annelies, maybe this is one that you'd like to pick up very quickly. It's a broad question. It comes from Paul, and maybe Eustace, you've also got a view on this. And it's a long question, so Paul, with your permission, I'm going to paraphrase it slightly. Essentially referencing the fact that the continent can be a global leader, I guess, for all the obvious reasons, in solar energy. But there's also a challenge to enhance, to raise awareness to potential customers about it. So that's the one thing. It's actually explaining to people about the efficacy of renewable energy. But he also makes the point about not falling into the trap of unlicensed business service providers. Annelies, do you have a view on either of those? One, awareness, and two, just making sure that you're not you don't fall victim to fly-by-night operations.
So firstly, on creating awareness, as the DTIC, we combine efforts with a number of entities, including Proudly South African, Brand SA, to promote South African products and services abroad. We host South African national pavilions, for example, and that's both for products and services. So companies, and we do a lot of work in creating awareness of what's available in South Africa, especially also on the rest of the continent. So we can definitely connect companies who are interested in using those services. And then in terms of wanting to know about the reliability of products or services, again, I think look at the regulation specifications that something is, for example, SABS approved, at least. We also work with the national regulator on compulsory specifications in terms of many of these components are unfortunately still imported. So look that they have those stamps of approval. So I think that those are some of the basics. And then, as I mentioned, looking at some of the initiatives like the PV Green Card, which is also an industry-wide initiative supported by the Industry Association. And if companies have doubts, they can always contact also the DTIC to see where we could possibly assist.
Eustace, part of the job, I imagine, that Proudly South African would be doing, given the importance of alternative solutions and renewable energy solutions, is you also have a job to raise awareness, responsible awareness among your constituency.
In fact, it touches on the fact that we have, as part of our vetting criteria, and which I touched on earlier on, the fact that companies that affiliate with us have to demonstrate that they comply with the standards prescribed in that industry. That quality criteria touches on aspects like that. So people like Mamiki with Actom and Eddie and his company have to go through that vetting process. And that way we give an assurance to anyone who utilizes their services that they have gone through a process that assures you that the products that you will be supplied with, that the processes that will be followed in rendering the service to you and in doing installations will be as prescribed, and that there won't be comebacks. That is the assurance that we give companies. And there's an extensive vetting process that happens in this office. When we give you the right to use the logo, we are confident that the consumer can trust you. And even in this industry, it's quite important. Yeah.
Mamiki and Eddie, excuse me, it's a question to both of you. Given that this is a session being hosted by Proudly South African, and the whole intention behind this is to make sure that we're not only helping business, but we're also in the business of promoting South African-made products. My question to both of you, and Eddie, you can go first. Within this space of green energy, solar energy, and all the accoutrement that goes with it, are there good, dependable, reliable, world competitive South African products in this space? I'm assuming you're going to give me a very positive answer.
Yes, there's good battery manufacturers that have popped up in the last 10 years. You've got the likes of Freedom One, you've got Solar MD in the country, but there's still a lot of room for competitive improvement. I do believe we need to industrialize the entire value chain. So we need a lot of solar panels, we need a lot of inverters, we need a lot of, switchgear we've got, cabling we've got. So I think the panels and inverters we need a lot more of, and a lot more battery manufacturers as well. But yes, there are very good battery manufacturers that are world-class. Their products have been very, very great. But we still need a lot more.
Mamiki, do you have a view on that?
I think my view is, I think it's issues on policy. For instance, we've had quite a lot of, I think, a few years where no new renewable energy or that kind of investment was happening in the country. And that allowed, whoever was looking at scaling up and building up local capacity to start scaling down and saying, you know what, there isn't a market for this. And in the time that we are coming back, you know, other countries have actually, you know, have moved on, and we're finding ourselves, for instance, what we're finding ourselves having to sort of import a lot of these, for instance, the panels at this case, because I've spoken about the cost of production has reduced, and the technology has improved. But I think from a South African context, in terms of our demand or local, our demand as well as the opportunity, we're not, you know, we don't have enough of that. So we have to definitely import some of these particular products.
All right, folks, we're coming to the end of this webinar, and what I'm going to do now is just some closing remarks from all of you. But perhaps a good way to do this is to revisit the original title of our conversation today. It's how local business can leverage off the energy crisis in South Africa. So we have a crisis, that's a given. We've also discussed that we need to operate in a new paradigm. It's no use us bemoaning the fact that we have a crisis and looking to blame people, because everyone, from what I can gather, is really working as hard as they can, collectively, collegially, to try and resolve the problem. So it's now up to small business to say, we have a crisis, how can we leverage, how can we springboard off this, how can we become, in fact, better at what we're doing? So Annelies, to you first of all, from DTIC's perspective, what's the call to action here to business? What do they need to do in order to effectively introduce a springboard strategy?
Thank you, Jeremy. So I think I want to touch on two sides. There's a supply side and the demand side, right? So we have the companies that want to use these solutions, and we would also encourage them become more resilient, look at the business case for installing a rooftop system, for example. But then there's also the opportunities for companies that can supply solutions, services, products to companies that want to utilize them. And as the DTIC, we provide a lot of support to companies that produce products locally, that manufacture locally. I mentioned the work we are doing around the Renewable Energy Master Plan, really identifying the opportunities at each stage of that value chain. So I would really encourage companies to engage with that and to help us, and to come to us also to help them identify where they could possibly slot in.
Okay.
Very much indeed. Eddie, what are your final words on
that? Similar to Annelies, is that we actually entering a new way of doing business. We have to factor this in to our day-to-day. So yes, there's a crisis, like you've said, and yes, we're not sure when the crisis is going away. So everybody needs to start looking at solutions, because at the end of the day, it's going to be sort of part and parcel and standard. Almost like silly example, I don't know if it's a good one. Probably 20 odd years ago, most cars didn't have a turbo, and now most new vehicles come with a turbo. So it's just become part and parcel. Probably in a few years' time, most homes and businesses will just have solar and batteries. That will just be the case. And yeah, it will just be sort of standard. Like most homes didn't have Wi-Fi. You know, 5 years
precisely
ago.
I mean, I'm just finish your thought.
But I'm saying, yeah, most homes didn't have Wi-Fi a few years ago. And now everywhere we go, in fact, it's even a choice. Like if you book in a hotel, you want to ask how good is their Wi-Fi,
Precisely.
or a conference venue. So
yeah, it's almost a hygiene factor now, isn't it? You know, I'm thinking in my own, I mean, you know, a couple of years ago, you know, if you bought a television set, you know, you wouldn't have YouTube and Netflix on your remote control. Now, if it's not there, you're kind of saying, what's happening? So that's how quickly things are moving. Mamiki, your call to action, what would you recommend to our participants today?
I think my call to action is not different from Annelies and Eddie in terms of I think as South African companies and the population, we have a responsibility to this country and ourselves. And I think one of the responsibility that we need to, take seriously is, working with government in terms of improving unemployment. And I think we've seen the numbers are clear to then indicate how the impact of load shedding has been like. And I think, we all want to be sustainable. We all want to be successful. We all want to continue to operate our businesses. But I think we need to then look at it from a long-term point of view and then say, how do we make that? And I think investing in this, it's not good. It's not only good financially, but also for the environment as well. So yeah, that's basically my call to action.
And Eustace, as the Chief Executive and the host and sponsor of this webinar, I'll give the final word to you before I wrap things up.
Thank you, Jeremy. There's a few, but I'll be brief. The first one is that I think security of supply is quite important for us as a country. So we need people to ensure that they can remain operational, such that they can continue to produce that which we need as a country. And so, I mean, if you witness what is happening now with China going into these intermittent lockdowns, there's global supply chain disruptions that we saw during the COVID-19. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic period, it was that we need to be able to produce that which we are competitive on, obviously, and such that we can fend for ourselves, and such that even those traditional suppliers that we depend on, even if they close their borders and those products can reach our shores, we're able to still continue, to survive. So we need businesses to operate, both because it will help the economy grow, it will help create jobs, and the economic indicators are endless that point to the fact that manufacturing and just border production within the borders of South Africa will help us start turning the tide. That's the first one. The second one is the other opportunity that exists, which is the call to action from Proudly South African. And in putting this together, we had this in mind, is that there's an opportunity for even those who can repurpose their businesses and go into this space to do so. Sakisa is a good example. We know Eddie from years ago when he was just doing construction, when he first came into Proudly South African. You see how he's repurposing, has gone into this industry, and he is the master at it. And I commend him for that. So that's an opportunity for entrepreneurs to seize the opportunity. It's a gap. The market is so big for both big players like Actom, who are members of Proudly South African, and Sakisa, who's a member of Proudly South African, but on a relatively smaller scale as compared to Actom. So the opportunities are endless. The last one is that there is an opportunity to take up the offerings that are being made available by the likes of IDC, who have funds available for those who want to go into the space, and because it's an opportunity to create a whole new industry, that we can be competitive about. And economics has taught us that if you aggregate the demand and you pull it together, economies of scale will then allow you to then take this to the market at relatively lower prices. And so we need players to come into that space. People to invest. Industrialization, like Annelies said, industrialization is the way to go. We need to industrialize this economy. And one of the things that we can do to completely industrialize the economy is to find opportunities. The market is there. I think I'm going to borrow from Eddie, if you allow me. This is going to be as critical as some of those things which were not critical a few years ago. And so people are going to buy. Do we want to keep empowering China and buying from China and Canada and those countries that are dominant players in the space? Or do we want to say, over and above those who have already invested? I know that, and Eddie touched on those, that there are people who manufacture the batteries and storage capacity. There are some players that have been funded by the IGC to start manufacturing the panels themselves. But inverters is another opportunity. We need people to come into the space and start investing. Let's industrialize it, and let's take up the funding opportunities that are available. So the opportunities are endless. The call to action is quite broad. I've summarized it into 3, and I hope it helps those who've logged in understand why we convene this, because there is a real need. Thank you, Jeremy.
I like that. It's all about the power of the pivot, and Eddie, you have all of our respect in that regard. Folks, hosting a webinar like this, I think has two important points. One is we need to inspire change, and there's no doubt that the crisis that we're dealing with now is a catalyst to inspiring change. The second one is we want to help make the right choices in this respect, overarched by the fact that South African goods and services are always, or at least they try to be, the very best solution in that respect. And I think that point was made very, very eloquently by the Chief Executive Officer. I have 5 takeouts very quickly, and I'm going to be very, very quick because I have 1 minute left on the webinar. 1, we need predictability. That came across very strongly in this webinar. 2, do your homework. We're changing, so you've got to do your homework in that respect. We've got to research as far as business owners are concerned. The most encouraging thing I heard from Eddie and Mamiki was that we do have good South African products, and there is room for more. To Eustace's point, the opportunity to pivot. We've got to think beyond cost. I think that's critical. It's that meeting of the curve where you marry cost and benefit. Once you get to that sweet spot, things will work. And the most important thing, I think, is for people to take the step, because the crisis is being dealt with, but it's going to be with us for a long time. To everybody on the call, thank you very much indeed. Once again, it's been my pleasure and my privilege to proudly South African host it. I look forward to seeing you, all of you, in the new year. Leaves me to say, have a safe festival or festive Christmas and holiday period. It's been good to be part of this. Goodbye, and the webinar is now over. Burgers.
Mm.